Lance and welcome to Bundy Bear's Shed. Well, today our video is going to be on resealing a Massey Ferguson rear axle. And we have two types of axles here. This one here is a Ferguson 35X axle. So it's a 12 stud axle. It has 12 bolts. Where it bolts onto the trumpet housing here, there's 12 bolts around there. It's a bit thicker than the TE20 axle, and the 35 and the late TE20s actually have a seal inside here which sits up in the trumpet housing of the tractor. So this axle here is an early TE20 and it only has 6 holes. It has 16 splines up this end, where the other one was, I believe, 19. And this early axle doesn't have a seal sitting on the in the trumpet. First thing to do is we have to drill down through this collar, and so we have to bring a drill down. You can't get a drill on a really good angle. You might be able to see it better sideways. Even with a small drill like this up against there, you are coming in on a little bit of an angle. So what I've found to do in the past is centre pop where this chamfer is here, centre pop just inside there, and perhaps go like that. It's about 3/4 of the way from here to here. So it's on the outside edge here. So what we do there, we'll just drill a pilot hole. I've also, you might notice, I've got the seal surface covered up. We must be getting close to full depth. Now, sometimes you'll start drilling through okay, and then as soon as the tip here hits the bearing down there, you'll know it just goes hard on you. And we're at that point now. Don't worry about the junk dropping down in the bearing yet. All that has to be pulled out and tidied up. And try and get a sharp drill. And then we just try and go down the side there. With the drill across to the axle as much as you can. Sometimes this drill, I have had them go and touch that axle slightly. If it just nicks it a little bit, no big deal. Try not to though. I got my arm in shot there a little bit, but it's a bit hard not to have it in shot. We're getting very close to the bottom now. just feel that's just touching the bearing, it's decided to stop drilling. So the driller I've been using there, I believe it's 8mm. If I could only see it on it, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? I think it's about 8mm. I'll even measure it for you. Hey, you don't get service like this everywhere. 8.5mm. So 8.5. I'll get that where you can see it. A bit of glare here today. So 8.5mm it actually is, the drill. And the first one's just a little pilot hole. So now we've got that piece done. Pardon me. I've got a stumpy little centre punch, and sometimes I start the process of opening the collar up with that. And in this instance, that was enough. So by putting my little dumpy centre punch down there, that was just enough to split it. You can see where the drills have just been touching it, coming through, and you can also see, I think you can see that, a little line where it just cracked. So I've also had these, so when you're, another way, if you haven't got a dumpy little centre punch like mine, is bring a reasonable size cold chisel in, and as it goes in, it'll start expanding it for you. And it's just got to split it enough just to make it loose for you, that's all. So there's probably many ways of doing this job. This is how I do it, so hopefully you can benefit from that. So I'll blow all this rubbish out of here now, and I'll go and mount this in the press. And what happens now is I'll get all the junk out, just so if we were saving the bearing, you know, you're not pressing on a bit of rubbish in the bearing. But the other thing is get the rubbish out so that the plate bolts securely down onto here. These holes here where the studs have gone missing, or the fellow that owns it, a mate of mine, he's still got them at home obviously. I do have some screws to drop down into those. So anyway, I'll set this up in the press and we'll start filming again once we get it in there. Well, that's the setup in the press. We've got all the bolts in down here, the nuts in. Where we haven't got a nut on a stud, we've put a bolt in just to support it all the way around. And up the top, I'd actually made a guide for the top of the press here. I had one shoot off on me years ago, and didn't it go? It nearly wrecked the press. So we're not doing that again. So anyway, I'll get you around the other side and we'll start pressing. And I also have a bit of wood under the press. So once that axle goes, it'll want to take off in a hurry, and that bit of wood will protect the wheel studs. And I'll stop it damaging the press, and yeah, so a little bit of wood does a big job. Well, I'll come over here and see if I can do a bit of pressing while I keep you in frame. So I've just taken the load there now. I'm sitting on 15 tonne. Well, this is the last of the bolts. I've taken this top section out of the press, the axle's still over there, undone nuts and the studs, and that's your tapered roller bearing that's that we're replacing. We're doing that too. This fella's restoring this tractor right up. We'll lift that stand off, or that puller off, and that's what we're left with. We have an outer axle seal here. It's a double lip seal. That's quite hard, but you'll see the spring on the seal always goes to the inside. On any lip seal, the spring goes to the oil. And in this section here where you can see the metal filing still, you can see the bearing cup, which is something we have to get out. And if you look around in there, you can see quite a bit of discoloration. But this tractor's probably a 1965 or 63, something like that. So, yeah, she's probably gone round and round a few times. So what we do next, we pop this seal out, we bump this bearing out, and then we go and clean the whole housing up and get the housing ready for some new bearings and a new seal. Just as a point of note with this bearing, if I bring it up close, you'll notice it's very dark in around here. And I would suggest that whoever's put this bearing on one time, it's probably been replaced. They've got it a bit hot with the oxy to do that. To put this axle, to put this on, I know this has to get red hot, but it just drops down and just sits straight down there, and I don't believe the heat would go right through the full distance of the bearing. Well, I've never seen one do that. For those that are interested also, the number on this bearing, it's a Timken 462A, and I can't tell you the cuppers yet as I haven't got it out, but I just found it interesting that this heat was there, and I don't believe, with the mass of the axle inside here, you've got a big mass there to take the heat away from this collar when the collar's shrunk on there. So I just don't think it's enough heat in one collar, because the colour goes out of that straight away, and you're right, but yeah, that's what I think's happened. I may be wrong, but anyway, it's good to have a look at your parts. Have a good look before you proceed. Well, I've given the housing a wash, and I've just sat it loosely in my vise in this way, my vise with the broken jaws. And to get the seal out, just give it a bit of a punch either way. Try and keep it even. And there's the seal. Now you'll notice that the seal is very hard on that lip. I have to put quite a bit of force on there to move that. So that's going good. So now we have a little lip in here, and it's not very much. So we have a lip there that the seal seats against. And then the second lip is the back end of the bearing. And you have a couple of options here, I suppose. One of them is, if you have a lathe, turn up a disc that fits in there nicely so you can push it out. But I'm presuming most of you don't have that option. So I have an old chisel that I've had it for years like this. It's bent for doing bearings and that. And now you can come down a housing and get a nice hit on it. But I also have alloy ones, bits of round aluminium shaft that we can use for such a thing. I haven't made a disc to turn that up yet. I'll probably take a measurement while it's apart and there's a chance of making one. But I'll see if I can just get it started. Make sure you're on the right lip, not the one that the seal goes on. and you can see the gap just starting to come here. So take it gently, side by side. Just a little bit each way. There we go, straight on the ground. So there's the cup out. And you're now left with an empty housing that needs a clean up. There's a little lip there for the bearing, a little lip round here for the seal, so you know how far to go on. So this hasn't got any paint on it. A couple of things I would do from here is this will have another bath. I'll probably give it a little bit of a bead blast just because I have that available to me. But anyway, we tidy this up ready for the new bearing. Now for those that were interested with the number on the bearing before, this is a 453X. It's a Timken bearing, a Timken 453X, and that goes with a Timken 462A. So there's your cup cone assembly. Alright, we'll get a few things tidied up and yeah, we'll come back. Well, I've got the housing here now, and this housing, I've taken the bearings out, I've taken the seal out, I've bead blasted it up just to make it nice and neat for my friend. I've run a die nut, 11/16 UNS over UNF over these fellas just to make sure. Now, to press this bearing in, we have to sit the bearing down that way, and for those of you that don't have a lathe or something like that available to you, what I've done is I've taken the old bearing and I've ground the old bearing on the belt sander, so it's just a bit smaller than the new bearing. And there's also a slight taper on it. I'm not sure that you can see that, but there's also a small taper, and the idea is that we can pop the bearing in, we can sit this on top, and then we can come down with a pushing plate, and this bearing, this top bearing, should push nice and evenly on the surface there, and away we go. So first up, we'll lubricate the bore that it all has to go into. Pushing a bearing in dry, no need to. Just run a bit of oil around, that will help. At this stage I've not put the seal in the back. The seal is something that I'll do a bit later. The back seal, if this bearing goes wrong we've got to knock it out. We don't actually damage a seal to do that. So to get the show on the road, we'll just sit that bearing in there. We'll press it down until this plate comes level, and then we know we'll be true. This won't take much pressure. Support it nice and evenly. Try and get something nice and flat. And we're looking to go in as square and as true as we can. So there, we've just got the bearing in. The bearing's nice and flat with the housing. But we have about 1/4 of an inch to go down yet. That's where this comes in. Try and get that as central as we can. Pop this plate in once more. And we should be able to go all the way home on this occasion. There we are, that's solid. That comes out, that comes out. There's the bearing in the housing. We can look underneath here and make sure it's right back against that collar, which it is. That's all we need to do for this moment. Now we have the bearing in. I've just started the seal. Now with the seal, the spring side, I'm not sure whether you can see that, but the spring side goes towards the oil, or the grease in this case. I've got a flat disc. The flat disc is very close to the size of the seal. So nice and evenly. Just look to see if we're sitting home or not. Yes, we are. So that's the bearing and the seal fitted. I've also taken the time to give the axle a wash. I've left that there to protect that surface. This is the surface that the seal runs on. So with this surface here, I've polished it up in the parts washer with a bit of emery tape. There's a slight little mark there, but there's nothing we can do about it, and it looks like there's a lip either side of that, so that will be okay. At this stage too, have a look at your wheel studs. They all look okay on this side. They look to be pretty good. So we put a smear of grease around the seal there, making sure you don't roll any of the outer lip. And for the moment, that just sits down there. It doesn't have to go right down because there's a shoulder down the bottom there. Just let it sit there under its own weight. It doesn't have to go right home at all yet. So our next job is to get the other part of the bearing. Now when I took the cup off this, so I didn't get any dust and things like that in it, I leave them wrapped up in the plastic. And it's all about being clean. So what we have to do now is get this bearing and heat it up. I'll show you how I do that. Yeah, look, there's 100 ways of doing this job, but I'll just show you a nice easy way that someone in the home workshop could reasonably expect it to do. Well, look at this. It's about lunchtime. We've got the chip cooker sitting here. We've got oil in it. And we have the basket in it. Now you mightn't really care that it's lunchtime. But what we're going to do is heat this bearing up. Now the bearing has to go that way. So I leave the cage in here just so it keeps the bearing up off the bottom. I put the bearing in the chip cooker, turn him on flat out, and we'll just wait a little while. Now, if you haven't got a chip cooker, well, I suppose going right back to the start, you can spend an enormous amount of money on something to heat a bearing up. You can heat it with the oxy. If you heat it with the oxy, you don't get an even temperature rise. You can buy an induction heater. You know, it uses electricity to bring the heat into the bearing. But over the years I've found that for most bearings, for this job anyway, the old chip cooker with a bearing inside it, that's as good as anything. So what oil is in there doesn't matter. The oil is just a medium to transfer the heat into the bearing. Don't be in a hurry to get the bearing out. The Flashpoint of Oil, last time I checked I was using a Hydrotrans oil in the chip cookers, and the Flashpoint was 320 degrees, and these go to 180, 200, something like that, I believe. And so what I normally do is on the dial, where are we? On the dial of the chip cooker, I just turn it flat out. You can see the lights on. Once it gets to where that light flickers off and on, so we know that the thermostat's working, I let it flicker on and off 3 or 4 times. And that way we know that the oil in the pot here is up to a reasonable temperature. It doesn't take long to get going. That's, well, just as I started filming I put that on. Another thing with doing this, I'll try and get it all into the frame if I can. Zoom out a little bit. Another thing with this is get yourself ready. Now, the bearing should just drop straight down and lock into the groove there. Sometimes they don't want to do that for you. So what I normally try and have in place is a punch, my alloy punch, and a hammer. And when we drop the bearing on, if it looks like it's not going straight, we can get a couple of bumps in quickly to get things in order. Another thing we're going to need to do the job, and this is do like I do. Oh, sorry, you'll have a sore foot. That landed right in the foot of the tripod. Is have the mouldy grips ready. Make sure they're clean. Give them a bit of a wipe over. You don't want to introduce rubbish for no good reason. And the idea is that we go in there, pick the bearing out, drop him straight down over here. It drops right down to the bottom there, and that's it, she's home. So I will take this masking tape off the seal surface now. We shouldn't be damaging the seal surface, and the other reason is that if there's a bit sticking out or we get caught on the way, the bearing might get stuck. So when you do this, make sure you're out of the breeze. I had one time, the wind was blowing in the door, I was going away here, dropping the bearing on, and it just cooled too quickly. So make sure you're out of the breeze, and that's about it. So look, I'll let the chip cooker heat up for a little while. We'll come back when we're ready to drop that bearing on. Right, we've had the light cycle a few times, and I've even got the pliers in there. Take a bit of heat out. So we'll just bring it up as quick as we can and let him drop down. There we go, that bearing is sitting right down there tight. I thought it was going to get bloody stuck there for a minute. So we'll turn the chip cooker off. And we'll just let that sit for a bit. And that bearing is right down hard on the edge. A little bit of heat will go into the axle shaft here, but very little. You can almost, well, I can hold my finger on that bearing now. That's how quickly they cool down. And if you bug around up here and diddle about too much, they do get stuck, and man, is that a pain in the arse. So yeah, that's the bearing piece done. And if we give that a tap just to prove it's close, oh well, it's right down. I know it is. There's no movement there. So let me just get down here for a second. So the next part of the job is the locking collar. So with the locking collar has to come down over the axle and lock on to the surface down here. Now, if you put that there and you just try and bump it on and go around and around with a punch, it stretches it. And I've done that in the past and it just stretches. So we'll have to take this over to the welding bench. We get the oxy onto this and we heat this up red hot. and then we do the same thing. We just pick it up and drop it on, and that's it. Axle seal done. So we'll go over and do that and get organised. Well, we're over on the welding bench now, and we're going to put this collar down over this axle here. But first we have to get it hot. So a couple of things we need to do is just make sure there's no sharp edges there at all, which there shouldn't be. Then I usually just deburr the collar and make sure there's no sharp corners for it to get caught on. Make sure it's clean, that there's no little bits of metal that are going to get caught. Get the multi-grips ready so we can drop him on. We also have a punch and a hammer ready in case we have to hop in quickly and give it a bit of a smack. Worried about a bit of heat getting out of the collar into the thick welding thing. What we're looking for, it's getting a lot brighter now. We're going for a bright red, not a dull red. Okay, so we just grab him nice and quickly out of the breeze. Try and get him straight down over the top there. And that's on. You can see it turning at the moment. A minute or two and that will shrink on. I'd let this axle get cool from where we put the bearing on before. So that's really job done. Because there's a seal here, this bearing needs to be lubricated. So I'll tell Ivan when he picks his axle up to, I may even do it for him if he wants me to, get a grease needle and poke a heap of grease down into that bearing. It's only a slow moving thing, like a rear axle on a tractor is slow moving as far as bearings are concerned. And a nice charge of clean grease in there. We have a seal down here, we have a seal up here, so it's trapped grease, and the oil is on this side of this seal here. So we'll just let that cool down and we'll have a look in a few minutes. Well look, that's the job done. We have one axle with a new outer seal here, a new cup cone bearing and a new collar. That's still a little bit warm. That surface is still nice and clean. Ivan will have to pump some grease into there. Now a couple of small points to make regarding the chip cooker here, or a deep fryer. If you don't have a chip cooker or a deep fryer or something like that to heat your bearing, there'd be nothing wrong with putting it in the oven or something like that. Don't put it in there when Mum's got her roast dinner in there though. They won't like that. And but look, if you haven't got something like this, you can use an electric fry pan. We used one for many years, but with the electric fry pan with the big surface area, the oil was a lot shallower, and yeah, we just found this worked better for us. There's still there'll be a bit of heat there yet, but we leave the cage in there. If you put sunflower oil in or something like that, you might be able to chuck a couple of chippies well, probably not chippies, they'd crumble a bit. You could put a bloody chicken roll in there, but be careful with the heat. When you're mucking around with the deep fryer and hot oil and all that, don't sit on a stool like I am now, stand. Take all the rubbish out of the way. Don't have kids and dogs around you when you do it. I know you don't plan on having an accident with hot oil, but it can possibly happen. Wear your safety glasses. With the oxy on here, on the collar, you don't get it just a dull red, you get it a bright red. And a bright red will slip on nice and easy. So that's about all I can show you about that. I've got the other axle to do here for Ivan yet. Hopefully there's enough information there that you can have a go on your own. But the sequence was drill down through the collar, split the collar off, press the bearing off. Now you could just bring in a couple of bits of steel in under here, like a bearing splitter or something like that under there, and press it out. That would be fine. The inner bearing there, if you have trouble getting that out, you could nick it down there with the oxy if you were proficient with that and you weren't going to put a big hole in the bloody axle. There's different ways of doing it. This is how I do it. It works well for me. But anyway, the whole goal is to show you what to do, encourage you to have a go, and go from there. So we're going to call that a wrap for the moment. And thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and all that. We're going to work on a few projects coming up, mainly tractor related workshop projects, and I won't film this second axle. There's no need to do that. We've covered everything we need to cover in this first one, but I will do a separate video on the TE20 axle. There's very little difference in the job. Well, there's probably no difference in the job, just a different size, but when you look for YouTube 35 Massey Ferguson 35 axle, you'll get this one. If you look up for Ferguson TE20 axle, you'll get the other video. So once again, thanks for watching. Have a go, and I'll catch you later, eh?